All right, let's get started. So I'm glad you're here. This video is going to look at the essential leadership skills that dungeon masters need to run effective tables. If you don't know who I am, my name is Adam Scott. I'm the head GM and designer of RPG Club. In terms of how I've come to this body of knowledge that might be helpful for you at home, and I really do hope it is. We've run over 17,000 professional sessions. We have worked with, I think now it's way over 6,000, mostly new players to the hobby as well as ongoing players. And we do it in a professional space, which means we're paid GMs to facilitate these games. And so it's not meant to say, hey, that's the only way to do it. But the things that I talk about in this video, they're done to support a professional environment. And they tend to work really well because when people pay money for something, they tend to want a really high value experience. So I hope this can help you at home. And if you ever want to know what we do, check the link in our bio. But let's get into the details. So I see things with GMs that come to me. And the way that this experience works for me is I have game masters that come to me and they say, I'd like to work with RPG Club. I'd like to run games professionally. And there's usually two different sets of skills that GMs present. They present the game mechanics or the understanding of the rules for whatever system they're looking at. And then they present their interpersonal skills. And what I've seen, I've worked with hundreds of GMs now at this point. I see the GMs that have a really strong interpersonal skill set. And I'll go through this list here in a second. They tend to be much more successful at engaging players in a positive way, connecting with players, running positive games, finding ways to include players, finding ways to help people. Because those skills, from my point of view, are so much more important to you and your friends at home than whether or not you know the rule on page 37 of whatever manual you're looking at. Because those things can always be consulted either at a downtime or after the fact. But the personal experience, the connection that people have to one another, that needs to take place in the moment. And that's an interpersonal skill set. I was a classroom teacher for 15 years, and that was what I thrived on, was being able to read the room and connect with people. And I think that skill directly can apply to you in your work as a GM. So I want to go through this list here. The list as I see it is it's stuff that is helpful to have all of these, but you can be better at one part, or you don't have to be a master at all of these things, but all of these skill sets will help you run more effective games. So they're not necessarily in any particular order, but there are a couple that I think are really important, and I'll highlight those. So the first thing is communication. Being able to communicate clearly is really important as a game master. Typically, the role of organizing a game falls to the game master, even though D&D groups and RPG groups like to say, oh no, we all try to figure it out. Usually the game master is the one that organizes it, because without the game master, the game doesn't really happen. So I'm being a clear communicator. So if you're looking at home going, why, my game's not as good as I want it to be, or we're having some tension. Communication is usually a big part of that. So as a GM, you tend to set the expectation for how the table will communicate through both your session zero experience and communication when you set up the game, as well as how you handle player behavior at the table. Like, do you communicate what you expect in terms of, it's so-and-so's turn. Oh, I'm so excited that you have this next player. I'm so stoked that you have something you want to do, but we're going to wait for this player to finish their action, and then I want you to go ahead and go. Even if they're your best friends, making sure that you can communicate clearly and set the flow of pace is really important. That allows everyone to feel like they're seen and heard. When I see GMs that don't succeed, the inability to communicate is one of the primary reasons. So if you're trying to figure out how to get better at it, at your game, improving your communication skills usually helps, or just being more clear, setting things out up front. Next thing, organization. If you want to run quality games, I personally feel it's really important to be organized. Now, I know there are some game masters out there that have random tables, or they can kind of wing it and generate an adventure on the fly. That's a skill set I don't have. And I've seen a large enough sample size to know that most GMs that are able to run quality games consistently, at least in the professional space, you've got to be really organized, because it's important to have the information kind of planned out. You need to not have let me phrase it this way. It's important to know what's coming next. So whatever the players are doing, it's always nice to know what's coming up next, what's going to happen. Is it time for a bio break? Is it time for another encounter? If a GM is organized, if you're organized, it's going to allow you to have a more smooth experience from one encounter to the next. So your friends and home group kind of understand what's going on. When the GMs I've seen go into a position where they say, hold on a second, I'm not sure, and they're always fumbling and looking for things, it really slows the pace down. And for me, pace is everything. The ability to communicate clearly and have a strong pace rate of play keeping the action moving. That's really key to having a good experience. So that's what I've seen in our professional space. A lot of game masters that are very successful, they have that leadership skill of being organized. Adaptability is really important, being able to be flexible when something happens at the table. This is, if you're struggling to run good games, it may be because you're very rigid in how you're thinking about what needs to happen. And personally, I think that there are sometimes plot points, like if you're trying to elaborate some type of plot or storyline, sometimes the NPC, that the mayor needs to come in and do something shady, like something sometimes needs to happen. But GMs that are not very adaptable tend to really struggle, because then it becomes about the group facilitating the GM's story. And really, from my point of view, and in all the work we've done, the game master is there to try to support the players and the group experience. So that I would encourage you to consider how adaptable you are. And if you're saying maybe it's not as fulfilling as I want it to be, see if you can find ways to be a little more adaptable and going with player ideas or adjusting course as your game permits. Okay. This next one, I think it's personally really important. And that one is empathy, and the ability to connect with the human beings at your table, I think, will determine whether or not you run a positive game or a negative game in terms of the experience and outcome. Without the ability to empathize, to connect with people, to see where they're at, to check in with them, it's very hard to succeed as a GM. And I'm not talking about professional, I'm talking about at home with your friends, because role-playing games, everything we've seen is it's a personal experience. And actually, that's one of the great things about it, is it's not, I don't think it'll ever be like taken over by AI, because I think the one thing that human beings love to do is tell stories together. So at your table, for me, I look at the emotions and experience of my players as almost as like the highest priority. And I'm always scanning the table. I'm always looking at every single player, probably on repeat, check all the players, then I check my notes, check the players, then I check my notes if necessary, if we're in the middle of moving the plot forward. And by checking in with people, it really helps them feel seen and heard. It helps them, it empowers them to give them some agency with their character. If they, maybe by reading, hey, how are you? Do you have a question, or what's going on? What are you thinking right now? By getting a read on where they're at, it allows you to apply follow-up questions to support them, to clarify, to see if their teammates can help them. Without that empathy piece, I think TTRPGs are really hard. So we've seen our most successful professional GMs, they just have the ability to empathize and check in and understand players is off the charts. It's just really a very crucial leadership skill that I find personally essential to my work that I do as a leader of the RPG club, as well as all of our GMs in running games. Next one, moving through it. Confidence. You got to be confident. Leadership skill, you have to be confident. You have to have the ability to seem like you know what's going to happen, or that you're in charge. Somebody needs to be in charge when running a game, right? You're at home, you're running a game. The players aren't in charge. You're in charge. Now, that doesn't mean you get to be a jackass. That doesn't mean you're the dictator. But like, you have a plan, there's something going on. Hey, whose turn is it? Why don't you roll for this? Why don't you roll for that? Or what are you thinking here? What choice would you like to make? Like, they look to the GM. The players look to the GM to set the tone and set the pace. The way that you interact will determine their behavior and will determine the overall tone of the group from everything we've seen. So by being confident, it allows your players to have confidence in the process. And when the players are confident in the process, they'll be confident with working together as a group and in telling a really fun story together. Creativity is the next one. This one I think this is probably most common for role-playing gamers, but I think a lot of GMs are very creative by nature. But if you're finding that your game is stagnant, or if you're having a hard time adjusting or getting the group to connect well, maybe look at changing some things up. Do something a little bit unique. If you're running a module, change something, adjust it. Use the inspiration you have from the movies you've seen, the books you've read, the other games you've played in, or a GM that you like online that runs in a streaming game. Like, be creative with what you do so that players don't always expect the same thing. They can really spice up your game and keep it interesting. And it is a leadership skill that can apply both to running games and outside of D&D, outside of role-playing games. Being creative helps you solve problems, and it can really pay off in life. And then this one is the last on the list. It's certainly not the least. Being able to solve problems as a leader, I think is really important as a game master, because essentially the act of playing together in TTRPGs is a social hobby. It is a group activity. It's more like running a meeting than it is writing a book. And the GMs that I see who focus more on I'm writing a story, I know the mechanics, this is how it's supposed to go, they tend to struggle. That's what I've seen. I don't want that for you. I mean, if that's what you like to do, I think that's awesome, but I don't want you to struggle. I don't want you to have a hard time playing with your friends or setting up a game for your family. I want you to be able to run a positive, engaging game where everybody feels included and engaged. And these leadership skills, from everything I've seen, are the tools that will let you do that. So be able to think, be able to solve problems, have that confidence when you solve problems, be empathetic. Like notice how there's overlap in all of these things. So I hope this has been helpful. If you have some thoughts or comments as to which one of these works, or if you find one particularly important, feel welcome to drop it in the comments below. If there's something else for GMs that you think is a really important leadership skill that maybe I didn't touch on, I think that would be great to include. Please let me know if there are any other videos that you have questions on. Also, with respect to what we do, if you're interested in experiencing RPGs in the professional way, or you're trying to figure out like, hey, I just want to get in a reliable game with people who show up, I think our attendance rate's like above 90%. So take a look at the link. We have all kinds of games. We have all kinds of GMs running really cool stuff. So we'd love to help you. All our games are online, and if you can get on a Zoom call, you can play. It's not overly complex if you're comfortable getting on a Zoom call. So my name is Adam Scott. I appreciate you being here. And if this has helped you at all, please feel welcome to either like it or share it, because what that's going to do is it's going to help share it with other people. And I look forward to seeing you again next time.